You stop trying to look rich in a way that almost nobody notices at first. There is no dramatic announcement. You do not wake up one morning and throw away every expensive thing you own. You do not suddenly become minimalist in a beautiful apartment with white walls and one chair that costs more than your rent. It starts smaller than that. It starts with one purchase you almost make and then don't. The shoes are in the cart. Or the watch. Or the upgraded phone, even though the one in your hand still works. The monthly payment looks harmless because monthly payments are designed to look harmless. $47. $82. $119. A number small enough to slide past your judgment, and large enough to quietly rearrange your life if it repeats often enough. You stare at it for a while, and for once, instead of asking whether you can afford it this month, you ask a different question. Who am I trying to convince? That question does not feel profound when it arrives. It feels irritating. Almost rude. Because part of you already knows the answer, and the answer is not clean. You are not buying the object only because you love it. You are buying the version of yourself that appears to own it. The calmer version. The more respected version. The version who walks into a room and does not need to explain where they are in life because the object explains it first. You close the tab. Nothing happens. No one calls to congratulate you. Your bank account does not transform. Your future does not open like a door. You simply do not buy the thing, and the world continues with the same indifference it had 5 minutes earlier. This is the first strange lesson of not trying to look rich. Most of the audience you were performing for was never paying attention. You go through the rest of the day with the same clothes, the same phone, the same car, the same apartment, and nobody reacts. The cashier does not look disappointed. Your coworkers do not gather in a room to discuss your lack of upgrade. The people you imagine judging you are busy managing their own performances, their own tabs, their own monthly payments, their own quiet fear of being seen as behind. This should feel freeing. At first, it does not. At first, it feels like losing a small drug. Because looking rich, or looking successful, or looking slightly more advanced than you actually are, gives you something. It gives you a hit of temporary identity. It lets you borrow a feeling from a future you have not built yet. You buy the jacket, and for a few hours you are not the person worried about rent, or the credit card balance, or the career that is moving slower than expected. You are someone else. Someone with momentum. Someone who has arrived enough to dress like a rival. The problem is that the feeling expires faster than the payment. The jacket becomes normal. The phone becomes normal. The car becomes normal. The restaurant photo disappears into a feed that no one remembers by tomorrow. But the payment remains. The interest remains. The reduced margin remains. The next paycheck arrives already partially claimed by a version of you from last month who wanted to feel better for an evening. This is how appearance debt works. Not all at once. Not dramatically. It accumulates in small emotional negotiations where your future self loses because your current self needed proof. At first, when you stop, you feel behind. That is the uncomfortable part nobody sells. You look around and other people still seem to be upgrading. They still take the trips. They still open boxes. They still wear the things that signal progress in a language everyone understands without admitting they understand it. You tell yourself you are being responsible, but responsibility does not always feel powerful in real time. Sometimes it feels like standing outside a party you chose not to attend and still hearing the music. You check your account after the first month. The difference is there, but it is not impressive. Maybe $180 left over. Maybe $300. Maybe less than that because life found another way to charge you. It is not enough to change anything visible. It does not buy freedom. It does not make you wealthy. It simply remains there, untouched, in a place where money usually disappears. This is the stage where most people go back. Not because they are stupid. Not because they lack discipline in some moral sense. They go back because the rewards of looking rich are immediate, and the rewards of not looking rich are humiliatingly quiet. Nobody sees the purchase you did not make. Nobody compliments the debt you avoided. Nobody asks about the emergency fund that went from $400 to $680 because that number does not photograph well. But something has changed. Very slightly. You have margin. Margin is not glamorous. Margin does not announce itself. It is the space between what comes in and what must go out. At first, it is small enough to disrespect. Then one ordinary Tuesday, something happens. A tire goes flat. A bill arrives early. A friend invites you somewhere expensive. A charge hits that you forgot existed. In the old version of your life, this would have created a small crisis. Not a movie crisis. A real one. The kind where you move money between accounts, delay something, hope the paycheck clears before the payment posts, and spend the day with your attention split between your life and a number in an app. This time, it is annoying, but it is not dangerous. That difference is easy to miss from the outside and enormous from the inside. You pay the bill. You replace the tire. You decline the expensive dinner without needing to invent a lie. The month bends, but it does not break. You are still not rich. You do not look richer than before. In fact, you may look slightly less rich because you have stopped dressing your anxiety in purchases. But for the first time in a long time, your life has absorbed a hit without asking someone else for permission. That is when you begin to understand that looking rich and becoming stable are often opposite behaviors wearing the same costume. Looking rich spends money to create evidence. Stability keeps money so evidence becomes unnecessary. Looking rich needs witnesses. Stability works even when no one sees it. Looking rich says, "I am doing better than you think." Stability says nothing, because it does not need the room to misunderstand it. The second month becomes the third. The third becomes the sixth. You are not transformed. You are still tempted. You still open the cart sometimes. You still imagine how the thing would feel in your hand, on your wrist, in your driveway, in the mirror. But now the purchase has to pass through a different part of your mind. It can no longer enter disguised as self-improvement. You see the mechanism. That is not a small thing. Seeing the mechanism changes the entire experience of wanting. Before, the desire felt like truth. You wanted the thing, so the thing must have mattered. Now desire looks more complicated. Sometimes you want the thing. Sometimes you want relief. Sometimes you want proof. Sometimes you want revenge against the years when you could not afford anything nice. Sometimes you want to be seen by people who would still not see you clearly if you bought twice as much. There is a sadness in realizing this. Because some of your spending was not about vanity. It was about repair. You were trying to repair embarrassment. You were trying to repair childhood comparison. You were trying to repair the feeling of being the person with less. And a market exists for exactly that feeling. There are entire industries built around selling temporary dignity to people who have not yet built permanent security. They do not call it temporary dignity. They call it lifestyle. The lifestyle is always one level above you. That is how it survives. When you earn $35,000, it tells you life begins at $50,000. When you earn $50,000, it moves to $80,000. At $80,000, it becomes the apartment, the car, the vacations, the watch, the better gym, the nicer grocery store, the kind of life that looks relaxed because someone edited out the payments. The finish line moves because the finish line was never a number. It was a feeling. And feelings are terrible financial targets because they reset after every purchase. By the end of the first year, the results are still smaller than your imagination wanted. Maybe you have $4,000 saved. Maybe you paid down a credit card. Maybe you have not increased your savings much, but you stopped making the hole deeper. That last one matters more than it sounds. There is a stage in financial life where winning does not look like growth. It looks like stopping the bleeding. You begin to notice other people differently. Not with judgment at first. More with recognition. The person with the expensive car who seems tense every time the bill arrives. The coworker who upgrades everything but cannot miss one paycheck. The friend who talks about money like they are above caring about it, and then panics privately when a group trip gets too expensive. You do not feel superior because you know that script. You lived inside it. You know how convincing the performance feels when you are the one performing. But you also notice something else. Some of the richest looking people are not rich. They are financed. Some of the most ordinary looking people have options. The person driving the older car may have 6 months of expenses saved. The person wearing the same coat every winter may own investments nobody can see. The person who does not rush to impress you may not need anything from your impression. This is where status begins to break in your mind. Not disappear. You are human. You still notice signals. Everyone does. But the signals lose some of their authority. The car no longer automatically means success. The watch no longer automatically means wealth. The vacation no longer automatically means freedom. You start asking the darker, quieter question beneath the image. What did it cost to appear that way? Sometimes the answer is nothing. Some people can truly afford the life they display. But sometimes the answer is years. Sometimes the answer is interest. Sometimes the answer is being trapped in a job they hate because the image of success became too expensive to interrupt. Sometimes the answer is a person who cannot downshift without feeling like they have failed publicly. That is the prison most people do not recognize because it has leather seats. The second year, your behavior starts becoming less reactive. Not perfectly. Not permanently. But noticeably. A sale no longer feels like an emergency. A luxury item no longer feels like a test of self-worth. A weekend invitation no longer automatically becomes a yes because you are afraid of seeming broke. You begin to understand that a person with money can say no, and a person pretending to have money often cannot. That sentence stays with you longer than expected. A person with money can say no. No to bad timing. No to performative dinners. No to trips that require financial contortion. No to financing a life that creates applause and pressure in the same motion. No to being pulled into someone else's spending rhythm just because they are uncomfortable slowing down alone. At first, saying no feels like social loss. Then it starts to feel like ownership. You own the evening you did not buy. You own the payment you did not create. You own the space in your account that was not converted into an object. You own the silence after the refusal. That silence becomes less frightening each time. And then something unexpected happens. Your confidence changes, but not in the way looking rich promised it would. It is not loud. It is not polished. It does not enter the room first. It sits deeper than that. It is the confidence of knowing you are not one accident away from collapse. It is the confidence of knowing your paycheck is not already gone before it arrives. It is the confidence of knowing you can disappoint a stranger's expectations and survive. This confidence is hard to market because it does not need accessories. 3 years in, the numbers begin to matter. Not because they are enormous, but because they have become evidence of a different identity. Maybe the debt is gone. Maybe the emergency fund is full. Maybe your investment account has become real enough that market movement affects it more than your monthly contribution. Maybe the old car is still there, but now you could replace it if you wanted to, and the fact that you do not replace it immediately tells you something about who is in control. The ability to buy something and the need to buy it are no longer the same feeling. That separation is one of the quietest forms of wealth. Because before, every increase in income had a destination before it arrived. A raise became a car payment. A bonus became furniture. A better job became a better apartment. Every financial improvement was immediately translated into a more expensive identity. Now, for the first time, money arrives and some of it stays unassigned. It does not rush to prove anything. It waits. Waiting money is different from spending money. Spending money gives you a moment. Waiting money gives you a future negotiation advantage. It changes how you speak to employers, landlords, clients, banks, even family. Not aggressively. Not arrogantly. Just differently. You are less desperate to be chosen because you are not financially cornered in the same way. Your yes becomes more expensive because your no becomes possible. This is the part of not trying to look rich that eventually becomes visible, but only after a delay. People do not notice the restraint. They notice the freedom that restraint eventually buys. They notice you are calmer when something breaks. They notice you do not seem as pressured by decisions that make everyone else tense. They notice you can take time before answering. They notice you are not always reaching for the next visible upgrade. At first, they may misread it as lack of ambition. Then, later, when your options become clearer, they may call it luck. Luck is what discipline looks like after enough time has passed for people to forget the boring parts. 5 years in, the distance between you and the version of you who needed to look rich is not huge, but it is real. You still own things you like. You still spend money. You are not trying to become a person made of spreadsheets and refusal. That was never the point. The point was not to reject pleasure. The point was to stop confusing proof with pleasure. There are purchases that make life better. There are purchases that make life look better. Sometimes they overlap. Often they do not. The skill is learning the difference before the receipt becomes your teacher. You buy better shoes because they last. You take the trip because you can pay for it without bringing it home as debt. You go to the dinner because you want the memory, not because the room validates you. The spending that remains feels cleaner because it is not carrying the burden of identity repair. It is allowed to simply be spending. That is when money becomes quieter. And quiet money is more powerful than loud money in almost every practical way. Loud money attracts comparison. Quiet money creates choices. Loud money asks to be seen. Quiet money asks what you want your life to feel like when no one is watching. Loud money is fragile because it depends on attention. Quiet money is durable because it works in private. At some point, you meet someone who reminds you of the old version of yourself. They are not foolish. They are not shallow. They are tired. They talk about needing one more upgrade, one more income jump, one more visible sign that life is finally moving. You recognize the hunger under the words. It is not really hunger for objects. It is hunger for arrival. You want to tell them arrival does not come from being seen as successful. It comes from no longer needing every room to confirm that you are not failing. But you probably do not say it that way. People rarely receive truths they did not ask for. So you say something smaller. You say you have been trying to keep more space in your life. You say the freedom feels better than the upgrade. You say it casually, because anything too direct would sound like judgment. They nod. Maybe they understand now. Maybe they understand in 7 years. By year 10, the visible difference may still be subtle. You may not look dramatically wealthier than your peers. In some rooms, you may look less wealthy. You may have fewer impressive objects, fewer stories designed for envy, fewer symbols that translate quickly into status. But underneath, the structure is different. The accounts are different. The obligations are different. The emotional climate is different. You are no longer living a life that requires constant income just to maintain the appearance of progress. That changes everything. It changes the job you are willing to tolerate. It changes the partner you choose. It changes how much disrespect you can walk away from. It changes whether a crisis becomes a disaster or merely an expensive week. It changes the size of your decisions because money no longer exists only as fuel for consumption. It becomes insulation. It becomes leverage. It becomes time. And time is the asset people were trying to imitate with luxury all along. Luxury says, I have enough. Time proves it. Time to think before accepting. Time to recover before returning. Time to wait for a better deal. Time to help someone without destroying yourself. Time to leave. Time to stay because you choose to, not because the payments require it. This is the hidden exchange. When you stop trying to look rich, you may lose some immediate status. You may lose the small thrill of being mistaken for someone further along. You may lose the easy compliments that come attached to visible spending. But slowly, almost invisibly, you gain the thing people were trying to signal. You gain control. Not total control. Life is not that polite. Markets fall. Jobs end. Families need help. Bodies get sick. Costs rise. The world remains capable of overwhelming even disciplined people, and pretending otherwise is just another kind of performance. But you gain enough control to stop mistaking every problem for an identity crisis. You gain enough control to respond instead of perform. You gain enough control to let your actual life become more important than the image of your life. That is the real status shift. The world teaches people to appear secure before they are secure, appear successful before they are successful, appear free before they are free. It makes sense. Appearance is faster. Appearance can be financed. Appearance can be posted. Actual security takes longer and looks like nothing for an embarrassingly long time. But nothing is happening in the same way a foundation looks like nothing before the house exists. The money not spent is not empty. It is becoming options. The debt not created is not absence. It is future breathing room. The upgrade refused is not deprivation. It is a vote for a version of yourself that does not need to keep renting confidence from things. And one day, quietly, the question changes. It is no longer, can I afford to look like I am doing well? It becomes, what would I do if I did not need to prove anything? That question is where the real life begins. Not the optimized life. Not the perfect life. Not the life where you never want what other people have. The real life. The one where your decisions begin coming from preference instead of fear, from values instead of comparison, from stability instead of performance. You still live in the same world. The signals still exist. The ads still know where you are vulnerable. The people around you still confuse spending with progress because almost everyone does at some point. But you are harder to reach now. Not unreachable. Just harder to move with the same old pressure. The machine still offers you identities. Richer. Sharper. More impressive. More current. More desirable. It still tells you the next version of yourself is available at checkout. But you have seen what happens after checkout. You have seen the feeling fade. You have seen the payment remain. You have seen the strange emptiness of being admired for something that made you less free. And you have seen the opposite too. The boring accumulation. The quiet account. The unposted restraint. The small decisions that nobody clapped for becoming a life that finally belongs more to you than to the image of you. That is what happens when you stop trying to look rich. At first, you look the same. Then you look behind. Then, for a long stretch, you look like nothing special at all. And then one day, you realize that the richest part of your life is not what people can see. It is what no longer owns you.